This is Nothing But Anarchy. This is the show that explores and subverts sports, entertainment, media, publishing, Hollywood, all kinds of stuff. This is a very important day. This is a day that I, on some level, have been looking forward to for a really long time, years, decades, even maybe. This is also a day that I have been preparing for decades. I'll explain, but today's a very special episode. It's a bonus episode. It is a conversation with author, lawyer, my sister, my IRL sister, Shannon Sanders. I have a bio for her. First of all, hi, Shannon.
Hi, Chad.
Shannon
Thanks for having me.
Oh, yay. Thanks for being here. Shannon came to Brooklyn for a book signing last night at Books Are Magic I think that was like Brooklyn Heights is where we were. That was last night. We went out and got dinner. This morning, we all woke up in different places and came to the studio so we could have this conversation about her debut novel, Company, but her debut collection of short stories. That's not a novel, right?
No, a novel is one work of fiction that has a connective thread from start to finish. So yeah, these are interconnected short stories.
Yes, we got to stop calling everything novels. And we're gonna get into it. First, let me read her bio. Shannon Sanders is a black writer and attorney and the author of the linked short story collection Company. That's the book. It's out now everywhere that you get books. Sanders' short fiction was the recipient of a 2020 PEN Robert J. Dow Short Story Prize for Emerging Writers and has appeared in several publications, including One Story, Tri-Quarterly, Joyland, Electric Literature, and elsewhere. She lives in Silver Spring, Maryland, with her husband, Wesley, who's here with us, sitting over there on the couch, or right next to the couch, and her 3 sons, my nephews.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just start here because people do need this context before we just go all the way to the extra spice. What is the intention of the book? Like, what did you write the book to say?
Ooh, okay. Well, what did I write the book to say? So it's a collection of 13 linked short stories. It takes like a really multi-generational approach because the stories are about the members of this one family, grandparents, parents, and then their children. So I had a lot of things that I wanted to say about just kind of like ideas of cultural legacy and the ways that what our grandparents maybe valued or what they had to do to survive. Um, Especially in kind of like the Jim Crow era and maybe like just after the Great Migration. So this would be a family that originated in Mississippi, settled in East Coast cities, what they had to do to survive and thrive, sort of how like those values either did or didn't work as well or in the same way in subsequent generations. So our boomer parents, the way that they were able to in many ways like even surpass what their parents accomplished. And then this is the part that maybe I identify with the most. There's a lot of characters in the book who are millennials who inherit some of those same legacies, and the expressions are really different, and then the success rate is really different. And in many ways, like we are kind of constrained by things that did not exist maybe a generation ago. Although, of course, we're free in a lot of ways that did not exist a generation ago either. So I really wanted to kind of take this like multi-generational look at some of those legacies. I also wanted to do a book that was about like gossip and secrets and lies that maybe circulate in a family, stories that have more than one perspective, and all of the perspectives might be in some way correct. I When you say intention though, I really, really love writing.
Mm.
And for at least a solid half of writing the book, I was just writing stories because I was having fun and then I wanted to publish them. Um, and then for the second half, I was doing it because I had an understanding that like a more holistic work was coming together. But the intention was to like say things about different things I had feelings about: parental pressure, performance anxiety, respectability politics, all of that stuff.
Those are elements of the community that we come from, and I can only speak to the community we come from because that's the only one I know. That in some ways I think have one driven me away from that community in a lot of ways. Like, I feel like I've created distance because those pressures make me feel bad.
Yeah.
They make me feel constrained. They make me feel hurt, and I haven't been able to completely find the strength within me to push back against those pressures while within those communities.
Right.
Um, I think I'm curious about, this book. I've only read the first 2 stories so far, but I've read so much of your writing over years, and even some of your writing appears in this book. So I've
Yeah.
actually read more than just those first 2 stories. I think I can see some of what you're saying that's in there. For example, people push too hard on their children, and they push in, or maybe you're not saying too hard, but people push hard on their children.
Yeah.
They push in sometimes in ways that are in conflicting directions. Like,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
tell you go left and they tell you go right at the same time. There are gender dynamics in the book that are pretty pronounced. But as I've talked to you about the book, I can only see what I can see. So I want
Mhm.
to try to pull out some of the threads that maybe I'm not seeing. Like, the first time I read it, the first short story, which I've now read twice because I read it when you published it years ago, and now I've
Mhm.
read it again in the book, which is called The Good Good Men.
Mhm.
It's about, you might tell me it's about something else, but I think this is what it's about. It's
Okay.
about 2 brothers who, I'm gonna super paraphrase, they go home to bully their mom's new boyfriend. Like,
That's accurate. Yeah.
yeah, like that's what they do. Every time their mom has a new boyfriend, they go home and bully him and get him out the paint. And they do it because their dad years ago, who left them when they were children, their dad taught them that, like, that was something to do, is to protect your mom even when she doesn't need protection. Is that fair to say?
It's a little spoilery, but yeah, that's
Oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Well,
I mean,
shit.
yeah, spoiler alert. Yeah, but
Spoiler alert on the whole damn
not
combo.
a full one though. I think that
Okay.
that's okay to say. Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. Yeah, it's about 2 brothers who, feel that they've inherited the charge of protecting their mom from these boyfriends, and so they serially keep bouncing them out. Yeah.
So I read that, and I told you I wrote this question down. Like what does that story, and what will I learn about men from reading this book?
So, okay, and you told me you were gonna ask that question,
Yeah.
and
And I meant to ask you about women first, but
I s
then I did the man thing. I did it.
I told myself I was gonna, like, prepare better to answer that question, and then I didn't really do it, but
Good, because I know your moves.
I do wanna say so that is the first story in the book. This is gonna be a little bit of a tangent, but
Do it.
I'm just gonna, like, explain kind of what happened there. So that's the story that won the prize that you mentioned in the bio, the, Robert J. Dow Short Story Prize for Emerging Writers. It's one of the first stories I wrote, and it is the one that I think has gotten the most attention.
Hmm.
It got the most attention on its own as, like, a solo story. Uh, I hear sometimes from high school and college teachers who say that they're teaching it. I feel like I have stories that are juicier and better and have, like, even more depth of character or whatever in the
Mm.
book, but I feel like the maleness and the male-centricness of that story makes
Mm.
people really fixate on it for whatever reason, and the description that you just gave, which is probably close to the one that I would give of that story,
Yeah.
is critical of those 2 brothers.
Yeah.
I hear all the time from people who think it's like a
Mm.
hero's tale, um,
Yeah.
and so I will say I wanna say that first of all, which is that it was strongly suggested that I lead the collection with that story because it was the attention-getting one, and it's, like, understood to be a strong one. There are stories throughout the book that I think give equal amounts of grace and interrogation to characters of all genders, and who are there are a lot of really super flawed women in the book.
Mm.
There are men who play much more benign or benevolent roles in some cases. But I led with that story because I thought that that one set really quickly and easily set up a picture of a character and kind of like the concerns of this family. Because another thing that we see of those 2 brothers is that they are both in their own ways, like trying to make it, trying to find success. One has embarked on a career in the tech space.
Mm.
He's a Brooklynite. He's kind of like trying to do a little bit of an
Yeah.
entrepreneur
The
thing.
sides of his head are shaved and he wears all black.
Yeah, and he was devised at a time when I had a brother who had just moved to Brooklyn and was kind of like trying on some new persona
Mhm.
stuff.
Mhm.
And then the other brother is trying to be more of a success in the conventional way. He has a job in the suburbs. He's married. He lives near home, but he's not really interacting with his mom other than to try to control her romantic life, you
Mm.
know? So back to your question, what is this book saying about women and men? I think, and I think that this is probably reflected among, through all of the 13 stories. I think what it's saying is that women and men do things that are well intentioned or that are set up but by whatever they think are the values that they have been raised to express
Okay.
that are
A
often
move has occurred. I asked what you were saying about men, and you're
okay.
telling me what it says about women and men. So I just want to call out to the audience: a move has occurred, and I would like for you to just tell me what are you saying about men, and then we're going to talk about women,
Okay. Well, all right. I'll be a little bit more specific about what I think it's saying about men. Men
please.
can do good things, they can do bad things, obviously. um, I think that one thing that distinguishes men from women in the context of a family is that men are given very certain responsibilities explicitly. And sometimes that it depends on what the family is, but it can be, provide, be stable, show
Mhm.
forms of stability and strength.
Mm.
Don't flap in the wind, like show consistency or whatever. But usually, what they are not called on to do is to be nurturing or emotionally close or keep track of what mom is actually feeling or thinking or what her real needs are,
Mm.
And so,
Mm.
if they see something that is a perceived threat or whatever, like a boyfriend who they think is taking advantage, I think that, at least in my experience, it's typical that a family is not going to expect them to be like close enough to mom and what she wants and feels in ways that will help them temper whatever their response to that is going to be. They're going to stick to protect, evacuate, threat, show strength and stability and force or whatever it is.
Mm.
Women are usually called on to do kind of the opposite. They're called on to be able to see around a lot of corners and to keep track of a lot of moving pieces of what people's needs are.
Let's talk about that. In the second story, there is a central character who, and again, I'm gonna try to describe her without spoiling the whole
Okay.
story.
Yeah, don't tell the end of this
I
one.
won't. I
Okay.
won't. I won't because I
You
don't
haven't
know
read
it.
the end.
Yes.
Okay.
So so as I see her, and it's funny because we talk about this a lot, but like I'm projecting people from our lives onto all these characters. I'm projecting us, myself, our parents, aunties.
I have a question real quick
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
I know you
Shoot it.
don't read a ton of fiction other than
Yes.
this, so I appreciate that
You
you're
know I
reading
don't read
this.
any.
I know you don't read any. But do you think you would be doing that if you were reading a short story collection by some other Black author?
I'm actually I want to talk about like the racial element of all this. So
Okay.
I
All
am
right.
gonna answer your question. Do I think I would be doing that?
Like, would you see the
Not to the
face of
same I because
okay.
it's in the details.
Uh-huh.
Like, we have an aunt. I know you said this isn't her, and it's not, but like we have an Aunt Susan. There's an Aunt Suzette here. One of your sons has the same name as one of the characters in the book. There's a boy in Brooklyn with his head shaved and like his side, like, but beyond that, even you and I, we talk about people with a very, uh, like a very, very high level of detail, the people in our lives, and we have been for years. So of course, I see these little pieces of them that are in here, and it's impossible to not see them that way. I don't know if I would see that in,
Mhm.
and also I think one is I don't think other people. I don't read a lot of fiction, or any, but I read a lot of other
Mhm.
stuff.
Mhm.
I don't know if everybody. I know your voice. You know what I mean? So like how I see the people in our world in some ways has been crafted by your voice. A lot of the things I see in the world are projections of things that you told me are how the world works.
Mhm.
So now I'm reading a book that you wrote and it's like of course I see you told me this color was blue and now there's a blue person here. So it's like of course I see it that way. Does that
I hear you.
feel
Yeah, I hear
honest.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where's that going? Oh, second story. There's a character in this story who is she is managing a lot. Like she's managing so many people's points of view. She's trying to get people to do things and she's
Mhm.
having to leverage all these different voices to get them to do what she wants.
Mhm.
She's a career woman, she is a wife, she is a parent, she's an aunt to, that's as far as I'll go on that, but like the distinction I see is like the two dudes come home and they're just like so laser focused on what they want to get done. And this person has something she wants to get done, but she is having to like do a magic trick to make she's having to do sorcery to make it all happen. Are you saying something about gender in that? Like, can you just now what was the question about men? Tell me what this is saying about men. What is the book saying about women?
I mean, well, again, I'm gonna say I wanted to tell a story, and I felt like one story that I see cropping up all the time is something like that. So in that story, the character, her name is Cassandra. She has just been named the provost of a university. So that's a huge accomplishment by itself. She is also a wife. She's a mother. She's an aunt. She's, the responsible sister or whatever among her
Mhm.
sisters. And I just think that that's true to life, that it's never enough for a woman, for example, to be successful in her career. People are looking at her to see, um, well, what's going on at home? What's faltering or whatever it is. If this is such a success for you,
Mm.
I just think that that's honest. I think that in almost every case, when a woman accomplishes something in any sector, people start immediately trying to see behind her to see what else is going on that's being neglected. And the opposite too. If I don't think there are as many characters in the book who are primarily family women and don't have like another side to them or whatever. But I think that in real life, when that happens, people interrogate like, well, what are you sacrificing to be able to do only this? And I just don't think that that's true of men
Yeah.
in most cases. I think that if they're doing really well at whatever is their definitional thing and they're doing fine at a couple other things, like I think people for the most part like leave them alone.
So even within that, and now I want to sort of take a half step away from the book itself and just talk about like our community and where we
Uh-huh.
come from. Everything you just described regards how people see each other,
Yeah.
like as they're keeping score of each other, basically, right? Like weighing, judging, is this person doing well enough or not well enough? And that is as far as I can feel and see sometimes, that is the driving undertone of so many interactions across I'll describe it as like this is ours, but it's all over the place. This is all over the country, but like our DC, Maryland, and Virginia, like
Yeah.
sort of well-to-do black society. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
black folks with degrees and good jobs. There's a feeling of judgment that these are my own words, so I'm not putting
I'm
these
just
on
listening.
Shannon.
Yeah.
These are there's an undertone at all times of like judgment and scorekeeping and gossip and like who's got the the big seashell. What's it? It's a conch. It's a conch.
What? Okay.
Yeah.
A conch.
Um
Depends who you ask, but yeah.
and I see that in this story that we're just talking about, and you've talked about it. You talked about it in your conversation last night at Books Are Magic. You talked about one of the he. It was mentioned that one of the themes is like, um, I don't know, gossip and hierarchy or something like that, like thereabouts.
Okay. Yeah.
Just I'm overstating it, but like you see something. Can you just tell me? Can you just say what it is? Like you see something, you're writing about it. It's there. Like what is it?
I think that the way that it comes out in this book probably specifically has to do with I mean, well, I already mentioned respectability politics, and I think
Yes.
and I think probably what it reflects here is the anxieties of parents about how their children are going to fare in a world that is set up unfairly.
Hmm.
And so there are stories later in the collection. There's one, actually, it's the very next one you're going to get to. It's called The Gatekeepers,
Mm,
and it has to do with a mother who is reflecting on choices that she made to try to raise her son to be like one type of Black man and ideally not like another type,
mm,
one that would make people uncomfortable and judgmental and all of that, and sort of all of the sacrifice, all of the work that went into trying to do that for better or for worse, you know?
yeah.
And in many cases, things that bring other people to judge her as a parent because they look restrictive or they look like they're overmanaged and all of that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that so you're describing what that community trades back and forth as judgment, and I think that that's, like, definitely, obviously, very much a part of life in any community, and specifically in the one that you're talking about, but I also think that, for me at least, like, I'm damn near 40 at this point, and I have people who look at me now as a product as opposed to as, like, a product in development. I mean,
Mm,
our mom still looks at me as, like, a product in development, I think, and probably always will, but I have people now who will kind of look at me and say, "Good job, you did whatever the thing is in some way."
mhm,
And it might be because, I got my, like, I had kids badge. I got my, like, I published a book badge at this point.
mhm.
And that can feel good, you know? I mean, that definitely is something that is rewarding after a lot of, "Well, wait, don't forget to do this, don't forget to do that, don't let this drop, don't let that drop." But I think that maybe that's kind of like the other side of it is that there is a path to being viewed as though you did what they were hoping,
Or, I mean, yeah, I mean, it feels
for better or for worse, by the way, but yeah.
it feels like it creates a cycle where there's such the story's called gatekeeping, like, there's such a, um, pressure and a scrutiny around getting into the right schools, getting the right kinda job, getting married, having kids, doing also having some other separate feat outside of those things that
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it's very painful in my even, like, as someone who hasn't had the same pressure to, like, have kids and that other thing, like, it's very painful, and then, like, I think it's easy for people to get on the other side of that and, like, a fraternity or sorority, take their turn to haze the next crop or
Yeah.
to haze somebody who hasn't gotten in yet, and I guess with you being someone who's aware of that,
Mhm.
and as someone who I very also much agree that you have sort of crossed the threshold, into acceptance from those types of people in that type of world or that those types of judgments. Like, what do you do now to not what's the word? Propagate, to not,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
propel that same
Perpetuate.
structure perpetuate, thank
Yeah.
you, that same structure forward? Like, how do you not do that?
Well, there's okay, again, like, this is really fuzzy or whatever, like, in every community, but it's true, in every community, there are people who are there to there are people who are there to gatekeep, there are people
Mhm,
who are there to hold up whatever the strictures of the community are, and who really like and want to do that thing. I do not consider myself a person who likes to do that thing, and I think a lot of creative people, I consider myself one of them, you're obviously one, are not all that interested in I mean, there can be overlap, but I don't think of myself as a joiner in that way. I think that there are people who are very much like, "Okay, we all have to do this thing, and then we have to make sure that everybody else has to does the same thing, and we have to make sure that they value the same thing because then they will look up to us as we have already achieved that thing." And I'm just sort of not interested in that, because I would rather be writing books, and I also my kids are all boys, and this is back to your questions about gender. I
mm.
think that y y there's so much that I feel like Wes and I are gonna have to do to try to make sure that they have good, healthy, happy lives and that they have a lot of options in front of them. But I also see that sons, by and large, are not really here for a lot of the same, uh they often do not let themselves be moved around in some of the same ways, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and in my own experience, like, not while being unaffected by it. Do you know what
Right,
I mean?
yeah. Oh, I
Like
know. Yeah, for
right,
sure.
and we
Yeah.
talk about that ad nauseum. It still bothers me
Yeah.
that people that we're like people that we care about, people that are like, you know, relatives, friends, aunties, people we grew up with. Like, it still bothers me that whether or not I fit in the bracket, like the bracket still exists and they're
Mhm.
still holding it up against me. Like that still bothers me. But I also do acknowledge that it's like, yeah, like, patriarchy provides for more opportunity for me to like go create my own bracket sort of or something
I
like
think
that.
I think they give you a looser bracket too. I
Yeah,
think the bracket that they're holding up is a little bit more the lines are a little fussier. Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
Um so when you talk about not being a joiner, now I'm gonna go way back and kind of try to paint the picture of you as a child, as I saw you, because it's amazing that you have like, it's amazing that you have accomplished so many things that have societal value because you did not seem to, I mean, you didn't seem to care about like the societal hierarchy. Like you didn't seem to care about the societal structure. With like the way I would describe it is you would be happy to be the kid sitting by herself somewhere coloring, drawing a picture, writing down names in a notebook and playing a name game with yourself. You weren't trying to like do the you weren't trying to do like the high school Game of Thrones
Yeah.
game. Like you were I think you were just trying to do what you liked doing for the most part.
I mean, I definitely would have liked to I think I didn't wanna play the high school Game of Thrones because I was destined to lose it.
Hmm.
So, I do think that part of it had to do with, I just figured out other stuff to do that was not quite as destined to failure, but,
Mm.
um, yeah, I mean, I was not real I definitely wasn't into, like, sports or other things that engendered, like, a team feeling. I was usually the only black kid in class for several years in a row, and so just a lot of kind of the metrics that people were judged by just really didn't apply to me. Um, when people started to, date and stuff, and when they started to form these little groups that were kind of more about whatever, boy-girl interactions, like, I just was not at all really in that, so
Mm.
I found, like, my little fringe friends and stuff, and I do think that had I been part of a community where I felt more like I was the median, where I felt closer to the median of the community and not like an outlier, I think I probably would have done a lot more joining stuff and probably a lot less finding what I really liked to do and who I really was early on.
Mm.
I heard somebody say recently that, like, if there's someone who's gonna be successful at something as an adult, it's usually whatever they spent the most time obsessively doing between age 13 and age 17,
Mm.
and for me, that was, writing, like, reading and writing pretty much, and, like, obsessing over these different fan properties, these franchises, The X-Files, Star Wars, whatever. Yeah, so I don't know if I'm, like, going afield of the question, but,
No.
yeah, I was not a joiner, long story short.
What did you love about those things? Like you were I think some people say they love to read and I get what they're saying, but I think your thing is a lot more intense than that.
Yeah,
um it was like our parents used to get in trouble for reading too much.
yeah.
That's so unusual. Like
Yeah.
most kids get in trouble. For me it was like, you know, they had to incentivize me to read by like with stuff like pizza.
Well, are you talking about Book It? Because I also did Book It. I
Yes, you
got
did book
pizza.
it, but,
Yeah.
like, there were different structures in place to get me to read. Like,
Yeah.
I had reading my reading limits were you must read at least this much. Your reading limits were, like,
Don't bring books to the table.
don't bring books in the car on a family
Yeah.
trip, like, put the book down.
Yeah.
What did you love about it? What like, some people I guess you know what? This is what I'm gonna do. I'm going to guess what you loved about it, and I
Okay.
would love for you
Okay.
to respond to it.
Okay.
Did you just 2 things. Your mind is going really, really fast all the time. Your mind has a lot of horsepower, and I think it gave you somewhere to exercise that horsepower. That's one guess. And the other is, I think sometimes you wanted to be somewhere else than where you were. I think most times.
Totes.
Is
Yeah.
that fair?
That's definitely fair. Yeah, I mean, and that's not unusual. People love to read because it transports them. It lets them see something else. Yeah, I mean, I was definitely very much into like there were often in elementary school especially, I often was not excited by what I was actually doing, which would be like PE class. uh I I'm just gonna throw like out Girl Scouts, even though I did like Girl
Right.
Scouts sometimes. But like they would be wanting you to do stuff that was just not that that didn't occupy like all the parts of my mind that I wanted to be using. And so, yeah, I was reading for that reason. I had my mind like blown open by certain books that I read at an early age. The one that I always mention is Flowers in the Attic. I was like 11, a little bit too young to read that book, but I read it at summer camp and I just was like the level of suspense that I was feeling as I read the end of that book was beyond like anything I had ever felt in any extracurricular activity. And I just felt like, you know, wow, this is so much more than what I'm doing, which at that point I was like at dance camp and I was not a dancer, but our mom is into dance. And so she sent me to dance camp a couple of times. And I'm thankful for that because I got to say definitively, well, I'm not a dancer, but this book that I found in the library, Flowers in the Attic, like was amazing. Um, so there's that. That's number one, is that it was just transporting. And then I know that really early on, I was not just reading for the content, but also for curiosity about the mechanics of like what the author was doing behind the scenes. Like I started to pay attention probably around second grade, I would say, to like choices that the author was making to build and give verisimilitude to the world that they were building. Um, I was into the Babysitters Club, for example, and there's like at this point there's hundreds of books in the series, but
Wow.
then there were at the time when I was in elementary school, there were like 50 and then 60 and then 70. And I just remember like reading the books and not so much following the story anymore as being like, okay, what's Anne, the author, Anne Martin, what's she going to do now to get this character to this resolution, you know?
Yeah.
So I started to just kind of like develop questions about storytelling as an art pretty early, I would say.
Okay, yeah, that reminds me, there used to be there used to be
uh,
Babysitters Club's books in the bathroom,
yeah.
and, I would, like, sit on the toilet, and I would be like, "Fuck, what am I gonna do in here? There's no cell phones." So, I'm like so I'd pick up one of those books, and I would try to read, like, one sentence, and I couldn't do it. I would just close it and put it down and just sit there and think. So, shout out to the Babysitters
And
Club.
and literally meanwhile, I was reading them so voraciously that when I would go to, like, the Scholastic Book Fair, I would get I would get in trouble if I brought home more than 2 of them, or sometimes more than 0. Mom was like, "No more Babysitters Club." So,
Um, okay. All right,
that's the
we're gonna t-
difference.
we're gonna take a break, and then when we come back, I want to talk about like the business of this a little bit
Okay.
and social media and how people present themselves. And I'm gonna try to get you to say I'm gonna try to get you to cross the spice threshold. Okay. All right. So I am taking a particular pleasure in this moment where you are being celebrated and seen, and your creative product is out, like your art is in the world. It looks right, like it feels right, it has all the right, excuse me, that's one burp, it has all the right cosigns and blurbs, and like it's got a good buzz, and 90 people came out to see you in DC 2 nights ago, and we filled up all the seats at Books Are Magic last night, and I see your like I just see it's just happening, it's all happening. People are like, wow, like there's a phenomenal writer out there who I need to follow now. And part of why it's giving me pleasure is like, or joy, is I've watched you like not change who you are at all to have this moment, right? Like even though you even though you tweet way more than you used to,
Mhm.
you always tweet in your voice. Like, I never see you you never look like I've watched people blow up by being dickheads. Like, I've watched people blow up by, like, changing who they are, changing their tone, pandering, like, and I see you, you're playing the instrument, the internet, like, you're doing the thing, but it just feels like you every time, and that's meaningful to me, obviously, because, like, I know you. Um before I try to get you to move over to shitting on other people, like, let's start with the positive here. Like, let's start with you. Have you found a way to enjoy this part of the game? The part that is branding yourself in some way, using social media, being a little bit exposed, being a little vulnerable in a way that, you're getting your voice out there, not just through your artistic product, but like through the internet. Have you found a way to enjoy it at all?
Yeah, I mean, I got active on Twitter, X,
Huh,
in 2020. So, I mean, I was being strategic about it. It was right after I won the Dow Prize.
nice.
I was like, "Okay, I think this is probably gonna start to move toward trying to publish a book, so let me start to use social media in a little bit more of a pronounced way."
Mhm.
Then, of course, the pandemic hit, and then I was really, really isolated in a lot of ways.
Mm,
And a big lifeline for me became connecting with other moms on Twitter.
mm,
So it became something that I had gone from like avoiding in a pretty intentional way for many years to something that I really liked to do and something that I kind of relied on in some ways because, things were just really, really difficult then. I had a little kid.
right.
Um, and writers do not I feel like writers for us, X is the place because we don't really, in many cases, want to be looked at. We don't
Mm.
want to show our kitchen because it looks a mess. We don't really want to show our face because it's not of interest to us.
Hmm.
Um, X is I really don't want to call it X. Artist
Don't, just call it
formerly, yeah,
Twitter.
yeah, artist
Yeah.
formerly known as Twitter. Twitter is a lot more of a place where you can actually have like brain to brain connection, I think.
Mhm.
And I
Mm,
I I mean, I sincerely do like it. Like it's a community that I think is going to implode, but I wish that it wouldn't. Um and yeah, I mean, as far as the book goes, I'm in a special situation because writing is not my full-time career.
mhm,
I have a day job. I'm not
mhm,
concerned about writing, I'm not concerned about if the book fails, like am I going to be able to feed the kids?
right.
And so for me, the goal is really to produce something that I'm actually very proud of and that I really stand behind, which in this case that happened. I love the cover of the book. I'm excited for people to read the stories. And so there is really only positive feeling behind sharing things on social media.
Mhm.
I think that if I were in a position where I were trying to crank out, a novel every 2 years or whatever in a genre that I knew was popular, where people were gonna be reading it, I'm sure that it would start to feel like an opportunity just to shill, and that would
Yeah.
be a lot less rewarding for me probably.
Because the reward for you is you write something, you refine it until it's what you like, and then you give it out to you share it with the world. And the reward is which part of it is the reward actually? Where's like peak reward? Like, where does the rat get the cheese?
I for me, it has been people reading the stories, and I mean, like, a lot of the stories, I try to have some element of a puzzle to them. I try to have there be little things that if you're reading carefully, you might notice in a way that somebody who's skimming will not. And I've been really excited by people, like, texting me to say, "Oh my gosh, is this what just happened?"
Mm.
People, like, sh people, showing me that I have succeeded in some way at creating the thing that I tried to create. So, that's the thing.
So there's a couple of things we need to parse around what you said before answering that last question about the internet and writers and otherwise, right? So
Mhm.
one is this, and I bet you felt it as you said it. Maybe not, which is like I am way more engaged on Instagram than
I
I am
know,
on
I know,
Twitter.
I know.
Now, is that to say that like let's take it away from me? Like
Okay.
last night we did your event. You don't even know this, but I took like a couple videos on the walk-in. Um, I probably made us take 10 times more photos outside than you
Yeah.
would have naturally done.
Yeah.
So, right? I asked for reshoots, I
Mhm.
asked for lighting, I asked for angles. That's not who I was a few years ago,
I
like
know.
at
Yeah.
all.
Uh-huh.
But I do recognize that, in my opinion, for me to have some autonomy over this thing, for me to not be beholden to Simon and Schuster, like
Uh-huh.
I have to learn those skills and I have to figure out how to like market and self-distribute.
Yeah.
So that's why I do it. And I also have like a performative streak. Like I did do the plays. I was on the TV show when we were kids, whatever.
Right.
Um I guess what I'm saying, there's two things I want to ask you. One is like, do you think there are um how do I'm all right, that's a more complicated question, so I'm gonna come back to that one. Here's the first thing. It's this. While I'm doing that, right? Because I'm
Mhm.
doing it, um, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna be overly sanctimonious, I think is the word. I don't know. I'm partially doing it for myself,
Yeah.
but I'm also doing it because I'm like, I don't know, like I'm projecting a want onto you, which is like, if Shannon wants to be a famous, career, wealthy author,
Uh-huh.
like whether she likes it or not, like Roxane Gay's photo is everywhere. Like Roxane
Yeah.
Gay's face is on everything. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? So whether she likes it or not, like she's gonna have to do this. She's gonna have to play this game.
Mhm.
Um, but I'd never have asked you if that's even something that you want, or even if you subscribe to that belief. Like, do you subscribe to that belief, and is that something that you want?
Do I subscribe to the belief that you have to be like that you
Front
have
and
to
center.
get your lighting right if you wanna be a good
Yeah,
writer?
like Stephen King. Like,
Well, okay, think about those 2 examples.
yeah,
Stephen King, have you seen seen pictures of him?
he's ugly.
He's not I'm not gonna call him ugly. I'm not gonna call
Okay.
Stephen King ugly, but
Well,
he's
I think
not
he's ugly, but he's like ugly handsome. He's like gangly. He looks like a monster.
he has a
Like,
very distinctive he has a very distinctive face, and
wow.
he's not putting on, like, a velvet tux to take his pics.
Right.
The other example, Roxane Gay,
Hmm.
who she's beautiful. Obviously, there are things about her that are very unconventional in her appearance, and
Hmm.
she really leans into and, like, embraces that,
Mm.
and she has a very authentic look, I feel, about her. Like,
Yeah.
every photo I've ever seen of her, the expression on her face is one that is thoughtful instead of solicitous. Like, she's
Right.
not trying to, like, make the audience happy to look at her or
Yes.
whatever.
Shannon is saying so diplomatically, like by her own description, she
She's
is a
fat. Yeah.
fat,
Yeah.
tall, like she is a really, really big woman.
Right.
And she does not like douse herself in makeup and like fake eyelashes and
Right.
like do the whole, yeah, but she does, like her spirit shines through the photos of her.
She has a ton of presence, and I
Yeah.
would say that the presence that she gives is a good match for the content of her books, which
Hmm.
is a sardonic, self-critical sometimes,
Hmm.
um, really thoughtful and honest voice.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
um, which is to say, obviously both of those people, Stephen King and Roxane Gay, I'm sure they get their makeup and their hair done right before they get photos taken.
Hmm.
And that's something that I would certainly, like certainly I assume that that's in my future at some point. Um, I think that it is important to figure out kind of like what your brand is for you. I mean, like, tell me if you think that this is not true. I feel like
Uh-oh.
you're a creator, like
Yeah.
but you're a multifaceted creator in much more of a like I don't think of myself as a multifaceted creator. I think of myself as a writer predominantly,
Yeah.
creatively, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I do think there will come a day where I probably have to reconcile with like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to join TikTok, for example, because there's book talk and yeah.
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 I
You're
mean,
gonna have to do it. We're trying to solve TikTok right here on
yeah.
Nothing But
I feel
Anarchy.
like you're better set up than I am because I do not have a Morgan or I so
No
yeah.
one has a Morgan but me and a couple other
No,
people.
only Morgan has a Morgan,
Yeah,
but
I know,
yes.
I know, no, no.
So,
I don't have a Morgan,
yeah.
but we've been trying to find other Morgans, and they're very hard to find.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'm with it. Like, thanks for getting the lighting right on our pictures last night. Yeah.
Well, so you you are a writer and you also are a marketer.
Yeah.
I think I'm not trying to like uh I'm not trying to preach it. It's really it's been something I've been trying to digest too. Is like as much as I'm doing all these things, like I am all these things.
Yeah,
Someone else might be like a professional marketer or something like that,
yeah.
but whatever.
Well, I mean, like, on that, I guess what I'll say is for me right now with this book specifically, and then I do hope that I write another book and that it builds on, like, this foundation or whatever, so I do hope that I have, like, more of a platform at that point. But for me right now, the sweet spot is kind of like, I want people to read the book,
Mm,
admire it. I
mhm.
want them, if they do see me or perceive me in any way, I want them to be like, "Oh, okay." And something that happened for me with this book, which was that I put up pictures of my, like, scarf I was knitting at the time that matched the cover of the book, and then in the signing lines at both of the bookstores, people were like, "Is that the scarf? It looks great, you finished it." And I just want them to look at me and be like, "Pleasant," and then be like, "Fine." That's kind of what they think.
Okay.
But I do feel like I'm sure that when I have a little bit more time and energy to give to it, then I gotta find my medallions and stuff too.
um so and that's Shannon making a joke because I'm wearing a chain because they can't see me. Um so let's talk about that. We have a common language, you and I, but we are very different.
Mhm.
Um you got 3 kids, so I think you probably have some new understanding and observation and reflections on this. How much of why we are different is because of like biology and genetics and randomness, and how much of it is because of like societal forces, gender, age, uh, birth order? Like,
Yeah.
how do you see those two things?
My kids are all boys, so it is hard for me to extract how much of it has to do with gender, comparing us with them
Mm,
because they are all super different. I would say that they're like
mhm.
at most 25% the same in any one way,
Yeah.
and they are 75% different in every way. For us, I think it's probably similar as a starting point, and then I do think that what society expects of us and what society has given back to us
Mm.
is probably amplifies it like 90% more, I would say. What do you think?
Um, I think I I think the opposite. I think that's so passive. I think the opposite.
Huh.
I think I think biological wiring is very strong. Like I think just in the way that you had to be stopped from reading books and I had to be forced to read books,
Mhm.
um, I think our brains were like that. Like I don't,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I think our brains were like that. I think I definitely think that our gender roles were extremely distinct as kids.
Yeah.
The way that they were placed on us.
Yeah.
Like the way that you said like you quit sports because you didn't like it. Like I didn't get to know if I liked it until I was reflecting on it as an adult
Mhm.
because there was no quit sports. You know what I'm saying? I guess the reverse, the flip of that was like, um, you had to get in trouble because you didn't wear your
Swim
swim
cap.
cap.
Mhm.
And you had to think about your hair all the fucking time. And like
Yeah.
you didn't want any parts of having to think about your hair, but like you had to think about it all the time. And that took up brain space for you. So I don't know. That's not
So you think that's the 90%
yeah,
and then or whatever,
I
and
think
then
that's the
the 75%.
I would say it's like I think our genetic makeup, like I think our the way our brains function is like super distinct to a person when they come into this world, and then they are reacting to the stimulus, which has
Yeah.
all that other shit in it. So I don't know, like 60-40. I don't know. Who cares? Um, Another interesting question. I just like sometimes I'm like going down a path and I'm like, this isn't interesting. Let's close that tab. Um,
Gender.
Gender. What I think I'm projecting this on the book, but I really think I see it in there, which is like, I mean, you've said it. You keep talking about the stuff parents put on their kids. What is something? What are some things that you like? If you could snap your fingers and this thing that feels put upon you, and it doesn't even just have to be by your parents, just by like your society, your community, like, what would you just wanna snap your fingers and just be relieved of that for the rest of your life? A sort of judgment, a sort of whatever. It's like, what would it be and why?
Uh, all of my answers feel really basic
That's
to
great.
this. Wait, can you say yours first? Give me an anchor.
Um, hmm,
I mean, I'll say a really basic one,
go ahead.
like weight, you know,
Mm,
food, everything about my relationship with food, probably.
really?
Yeah, I don't think that that's necessarily something that our parents put on me at all. But society as a whole, like I feel like I would have a lot of brain space freed up if I didn't care about weight or food or appearance as tied to those things.
Mm. I don't think I've ever heard you talk about that ever. I don't think we have ever talked about that one single time, so I'm glad you said it.
Okay, well, there's one.
I didn't know
Okay.
that. I think for me, I mean, I've definitely seen the adult ramifications of people not having enough money
Yeah.
lately. Like I'm watching how it can destroy things. Like
Uh-huh.
can tear people apart, couples apart, families apart. I think that is a also very cliche one, but now getting to watch it play out in my mid 30s, like when the stakes are much more real than they were 10 years ago for
Uh-huh.
many of us, for some of us. Uh
So are you saying like you're a socialist or are you saying like you're saying you would take away the pressure surrounding money? That's what you mean. If you could snap your fingers and remove it from your own life and other people's.
that feels like a loaded question cuz I guess I'm not about to sit here and say I'm a socialist into this microphone.
Okay.
But um
I'm just trying to define your answer.
I just wish frankly, like I think what I'm saying is I wish black people could have some relief from like
Yeah.
poverty, right? For people who are actually in poverty, but even for people who are middle class, just like the threat of falling into a lower class and how that can destroy a person's self-esteem, family, um, communities. Like I don't know, I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, me too. Yeah.
And also, let's talk about since I just brought it up. I stumbled over your bio because it said Shannon Sanders is a black writer. Those are the first one, two, three, four, five words of the bio, and I didn't expect to see black there. So I know you probably spent a lot of time crafting your bio.
Mhm.
Um, why did you choose to include the word black there? I'm curious.
Because it's true and I want people to have a grounding to an expectation
Mhm,
and I want also I mean, of course I don't want to alienate any part of an audience and I'm sure that there are people who put the book back down if they think it's about black people
mhm,
as they do for all books that are by black authors or about black characters. But I I mean, I want people to know that I identify with that. I think that, I've mentioned this a couple of times in these bookstore events and stuff. There's, like, a small number of working, successful Black woman short story writers. I'm really proud of them. I
mhm.
think that they are doing something in many ways that is very special because they are doing everything that every other short story writer is doing, but then they are lacing in a particular experience that is, um they are they're doing it backward and in heels, you know, like Ginger Rogers or whatever, and they also are doing it in a way that has to be accepted the way that Ernest Hemingway's stories are accepted, but also they have to do it in a way that is true to them.
Mm.
And so I really aspire to be like them, and I wanna make sure that that is known, that I'm not trying to, like, you know, pretend otherwise or something or hide.
And this is a nuanced complexity of the whole experience of being a black creative person. And you also wanted to tell your publisher, do not give me one of those basic black ass covers because I don't want somebody to think they know what my book is before they open it. And what I mean by that, I'm paraphrasing. Um, you were specific to say do not give me a cover for my book that pattern matches to every other cover by a black woman. Like, let's have some specificity and precision about what my cover is. Can you talk a little bit about how you like? I remember you telling me that was a fear of yours that they were going to
Mhm.
slap something on it like that. Where does that fear come from, and how did you deal with it, and how did you end up getting what I think is a much more artistic cover than that?
Yeah, I mean, so that has been something that I have always worried about in some way. And to be clear, so my publisher is Grey Wolf. They were wonderful. They were really responsive and receptive when we talked about that. They
Mhm.
give you a questionnaire. They say kind of like, what are some of your hopes for the cover and that kind of thing. And they understood exactly what I meant when I said, like, I'm trying to hew away from what I see, which is kind of this. So I love Jacob Lawrence as a painter, obviously, but we see like this theme of faceless black, figures, literally the color black figures with big natural hair in sort of like block colors on the cover. And there are very successful writers who have had lots of covers like that. And I just did not want to, even though, of course, like I said, I want to consider myself in the tradition of like Danielle Evans and ZZ Packer and Nafisa Thompson Spires and other Black writers who I think are very clearly writing about Black people. I did not want to pigeonhole the reader experience in that I didn't want them to pick up the cover, see those figures, and then be thinking of those figures and whatever they associate with those figures as they turn to the first story
Got
you
you.
know
Yeah.
and they were super responsive to that. They like immediately understood what I meant. I showed them a couple of examples of things that I admired but did not want. And we ended up working with a really wonderful designer. Her name is Kimberly Glider. I think she might be based in Brooklyn actually. And she came up with something that was so far outside of anything that I ever would have thought of, but I personally think it's really perfect. I love like the modularity of it and like the 4 squares, because there's a lot of structure in the stories. There's a lot of, like,
Mhm.
this is how you have to present, this is how
Mm.
you should behave, and I like all the angles that you see on the cover, but then I like also that there is this hint of a secret. There's a shadow in one of the windows,
Mm.
on the front of the cover. I think that it's like, yeah, she did a perfect job.
It's a lovely cover. We have 30 minutes left, and when we come back, um, I'm gonna get really transparent about trying to bait you on being spicy. I'm just gonna literally throw things at you that I know you have spicy takes on.
Gosh.
So we're gonna stop talking. We're gonna probably move away a little bit from the book and from the authorial experience. And now I just want people to. Now we're just gonna be podcasting. But where can people find you? First of all, where can they find you?
They can find me at shannonsanderswrites.com, and they can also find me on X at uh, username Shanders Writes, SHANDERS
Mm-hmm.
Writes, WRITES.
And they can find me on X at Coachella. Sorry, just kidding. That was just a punchline. Go ahead. Please continue.
And to a lesser extent, they can find me on Instagram at I.exaggerate.
And where do they buy the book?
Anywhere that books are sold. So preferably your own local independent bookstore, because we'll be able to write books for longer as long as those bookstores still exist.
Yeah.
If you need one if you don't have one and you need one, order it from loyalty bookstores in DC or Silver Spring, Maryland. But it can also be found at Barnes and Noble, Amazon, IndieBound, everywhere.
That's all right. Buy it on Amazon only if you have to,
Yeah.
because Amazon owns AMP, and AMP is going away because they just destroyed it out of nowhere and
And they're
fired everybody.
cannibalizing all the bookstores.
That's right. All right. Now, here's where my
I'm
understanding of Shannon's moves is going to be of prime importance. Yes?
I'm not gonna talk shit about anybody.
I'm not
Okay.
asking you to.
Okay.
See, that's a move. That's a move. Shannon has a mask on also because of COVID safety, and they have 3 little kids, and so I can't see her whole face, which is debilitating to my ability to withstand her ninja moves, but I'm gonna do my best. Okay. You're not gonna talk shit about anybody. You're just you know what? Matter of fact, let's just start there. You have the spiciest takes of anybody. Wesley, do you corroborate this? You would agree. Okay. Shannon's husband, Wesley, just corroborated that Shannon has extremely spicy takes. And I think my takes are like at the 80 percentile level of the spice of your takes, basically. That's what I would say. Why? And this is a real question, like with a real answer, but just give me the real answer. Like, why do you start off by saying, I'm not going to talk shit about anybody? You know, I'm not going to ask you to specifically talk shit about anybody.
Okay.
Maybe you know that. But like, I do want you to blow venom into the microphone a little bit because like, I think people they need to get the sentiment in its raw form sometimes. Like, it's potent that way. And you're smart. You have good takes. You have a good heart. Like, the people who would judge you for your point of view or be mad at you are the ones who need to be affected by it, in my opinion. What do you think?
I I hear that. I hear that. I mean, I am interested in I don't understand. So what's the question? Like,
The
why? What's the difference between?
No, the question is like, I know that you want to give your point of view. You never want to just like blowtorch people's eyebrows with
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Why?
That's because I don't think that's kind. I don't like to be unkind. And I think there's a big difference between being thoughtful, actually being able to name what's in front of you and what you think about it, and being unnecessarily unkind. And I don't like when people do that to me. I don't want to do it to other people.
Do you think that when I do my show, I'm being unkind?
I would say I have occasionally heard things that if I were the target, they would hurt my feelings. Yeah. I
And
don't think you're
that's
an unkind person, and I don't think there's an unkind tone or intention in general. But I definitely think there's a possibility for receiving a kind of honesty about yourself that can hurt, even if on reflection you will know it's true. And I do also
mm,
think that like sometimes people are not in a place where they are able to parse out which of the two it is. Like they might just be only hurt by it and unable to be uh helped by it right away.
do you so okay. Okay.
But
I understand that.
but like I mean, a big part of your brand is authenticity.
It's not my
And
brand, it's myself.
okay, a big part of the chat experience is authenticity. No, but I mean like you say at the top of the show, this is the show where we subvert expectations. That's what you say. Like
More or less.
yeah, and you also say, like, when you have a guest on, you say, "I wanna get them I wanna dig to the point where I hear, like, the real takes and stuff like that." Um, yeah, I mean, that's what you're giving.
Well, I just find that there is so much unsaid subtext in our actual day-to-day interactions,
Yeah, it's it.
and I do believe that part of someone's writing and their voice comes from, like, that subtext, like,
Yeah.
what they know that's being left unsaid about society and how we interact with each other, and I will say again, like, you know, your observations within that subtext are so they have such a point of view, right? And they are on fire. Like they are blowtorching. Like the book is on fire because it has your point of view in it. So I guess this is a question of philosophy, which is like if you know that you stand on those things so much as being true,
Uh-huh.
how can they then not be acceptable for someone to hear in their ears?
Okay, well, I mean, I have a few thoughts about this. So number
Shoot.
1 is that, like, I don't think, and even less now than maybe 10 years ago, I do not feel confident that just because I feel something or think something that it's right or that I'm gonna still feel it in 3 years, for
Mhm,
example. You know what I
mhm,
mean?
mhm,
So I would not want to so that's one thing. I
mhm,
don't necessarily feel that my opinion has any more weight than whatever the counterpoint to that opinion is. And
mm,
yeah, so that's a thing. That has been especially true, I would say, from this shift, from not being a parent to becoming a parent. Like a really easy low-hanging example is that I like a lot of people had tons of opinions about what parenting would be like, what people should or shouldn't do with their little kids and all that stuff. And all of that
mhm,
has been upended in a way that makes me look at other stuff that I feel sure about and think, well, okay, maybe once I cross that bridge, it's gonna, I will cross other bridges in the same way. There's that. Another thing is that with fiction, which is where I kind of choose to express like my spicy takes, as you're calling them, like one thing that the book does, I know we're moving on from the book kind of, but
Go ahead.
like, you can write a story that expresses a point of view by depicting events, and then you have enough control to express the opposite point of view by depicting events from the other side or whatever, or by providing some objective truth or something to center it in there. And so I think what I'm a lot more interested in doing is describing what I see versus criticizing what I see, you know.
In writing, but
Well, in
in
general.
texts, you are blowtorching these niggas' faces off because they're phony and because they're acting crazy. You don't do you not want me to say this?
I mean, I'll say
I'm
I'll
not
hear
gonna
it.
put names on it, but
Okay.
like I know what it is. Like,
Okay.
um recently, and you and I we fixate, you know what I mean? Like we pick a thing and we spend 30 days like singeing it to ashes basically, right? In our
Gosh.
conversations. Do you define that
I mean, you're
not
using
to be
like
so?
really fiery, incendiary language on it. You said blowtorch, singeing it to ashes.
Imagine
What?
if someone read our text thread, how it would scourge their fucking retinas.
All right,
um,
continue.
okay, what I'm saying is I'm just gonna get to the point of it, which
Okay.
is we have Rachel called us film snobs last night.
She did?
Yeah, she did.
I didn't hear her. Okay.
Rachel's our cousin who was here on Thursday's show. And
Oh, yeah, because we said Marvel.
yeah,
Sucks.
and yeah. And what it feels related to is like what, Morgan?
I like Marvel.
Oh, what an upset.
Yeah. Wes is
Um
glaring over on the other side of the room.
and
by
Wes
the way.
does too, yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, here's let me just get to the point. Cuz now I'm doing the thing. I need to just get to the point, which is this. I am of the opinion that if people put something on the internet,
Yeah.
it is available to be blowtorched.
Okay. I'm with you, but that does not mean that I have to be the one to publicly do it.
I'm
But
not
yeah.
done. I'm not
Okay,
done.
Go ahead.
I respect your boundaries around
Okay.
how you want to express your points of view.
Okay, go ahead.
My point is we have been giving observation to the way that people represent themselves, particularly on social media and in content lately,
Yeah.
right? Not gonna do anything bad here.
Okay,
Shannon
I'm
is
listening.
I'm watching my sister show me she's giving me the mannerisms that tell me she's nervous about what I'm about to say. But you don't have to be. I'll ask the question broadly. All right, we have 10 minutes left, and Morgan has to get her question in too.
Okay.
So the question is like, I think you and I almost like double and triple down on trying to be authentic in how we represent ourselves. In some ways, almost like maybe in a way that like can slow you down a little bit. I'll speak for myself. I think like some things could have happened faster if I was willing to just like ride the train on like being whoever somebody wanted me to be so I could be right next to them.
Okay.
Recently we see a lot, like we've been talking about people straining on the internet, people putting the camera on themselves and trying so hard to be interesting, trying so hard to have a point of view, trying so hard to look a certain way, and it's just not working. And more than anything, like it makes me feel uncomfortable. Like looking at it makes me feel uncomfortable. That is something that also tweaks you. Like that's something that also you don't like. Why do you not like it? What does it tweak? What does it make you feel?
What does it make if I see someone straining?
If you see somebody, just go where I'm trying to take you, Shannon.
Okay.
You're doing the move. Just go where I'm trying to take you.
I'm trying to understand the question because I don't actually mind if I see someone straining. If I see someone, I mean, what bothers me on the internet is when I see someone trying to sell me self-doubt and self-criticism,
Mm.
which I think is a very wide swath of what I am seeing on the internet. And our algorithms are different, of course, but I like, my experience with Instagram, a little bit less so right now because I feel good about myself because I just published a book.
Mm.
But a lot of my Instagram experience for maybe like the 2 years prior to this
Mhm.
were that I would be on there not really enjoying myself and often like feeling very close to tears because of how
Wow.
much I mean, my algorithm is selling me like you are not doing well enough. That's what
Huh.
my algorithm is giving me. And I think that like that is what people are being right now incentivized to sell
Mm.
on social media. They are trying to show you mirrors that are uh they're not distorted. I mean, I think that they're like accurate mirrors, like very well lit, blemishes and all that stuff.
Mm.
And they are doing that by showing you what they are doing that is so carefully curated that there's no space for what your experience looks like in there. So that's what I tweak on the internet.
Great.
If people are doing things and they look silly or they are cringy or whatever, like I actually find that in some ways comforting. I can watch that for a lot longer than I can the other thing.
Okay, that is a better way of saying what I was trying to say, which is
Okay.
like you don't like people trying to it's we talked about air burgers. You don't like people trying to sell you an air burger by
Oh
making
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah, yeah.
feel shitty about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
And,
right.
I mean, like, I'm a mom of small children, so a lot of what I get served is like that extremely straight up the middle,
Mm,
purple, don't want to alienate the anti-vaxxers, but we also don't want to alienate the crunchy, the silky moms. Um,
there you go.
that's what they call them, is like crunchy moms and silky moms. We don't want to alienate anybody, so we're just going to give you the nothingest that we possibly can and have you still feel like you're seeing something. This is also why I'm not
Yes.
trying to be like a mom influencer on the internet because I both can't and don't want to do that.
Word. Yeah. I don't yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well said. Okay. Morgan, what's your question?
Okay, my question was, um, so your book's about like a family,
Yeah.
and I think family dynamics, sibling dynamics, all of that is super interesting. And in the past few years, my family in particular has like really reflected on just like our dynamics from like I was upbringing. And so I'm curious, like when you were writing this, because you said some of it is stories that you've had before, how much of this like changed in hindsight, and also like how much of it as you like had kids also changed the stories because you have new knowledge, maybe
Yeah.
like you've sat with something longer, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So there's 13 stories in the book. I would say 6 or 8 of them were written or almost written before, no, I'll say 6 of them were written before 2018, which is when I had my first son. And those stories, like, I was still doing that same kind of multi-generational thing, like, the stories still involved mothers, daughters, aunties and nieces, and even grandmothers. And then there's a period, like, between 2016 or 2017 when I was expecting my first son and, like, 2020 when I was raising a toddler, where there's this shift and, like, suddenly concerns about parenting and, like, the choice about whether to become a parent and the choice about, how to approach those early years of parenting, like, those things start to really become central to the stories. And then also this thing about the way that being a parent, the shift from parent to grandparent, which I could see, like, my own mom going through and, like, in some ways really struggling with, I think, because there's a loss of agency that happens there. Those things, like, definitely affected, like, the character of those middle 4 stories.
Mm.
And then I had a thing that was, like, I really wanted to finish writing the book that I had started, and so I had twins after that, so then we had 3 kids. And I really felt like I wanted to try to find my way back to the person I was when I was writing those early stories, and I felt like in some ways that perspective had shifted so much that I almost felt like I was writing a different book. Um,
Mm.
and so that was a little bit of a struggle, was like trying to finish the last few stories still in the frame of mind of the person that I felt like I had been a few years earlier. But yeah, I mean, like the way that I thought about family dynamics, I have always been a very close observer, I think, of the way that those things happen and like around holiday gatherings, for example, road trips, family reunions. When we were growing up, we used to go on family reunion trips, and they would always put me in the car with my dad and Chad, and my mom and her sister and their mother would ride in a different car, and they would always say, "Ride with your brother and your dad." And I would be like, "But I want to hear the goss. I want to
You
hear
thought
what's."
we didn't have goss.
You didn't have goss. There was none. There was none happening. It would be like about like, oh look, there's a barn, there's a cow.
Oh, wow. Oh my God. That's
Riveting.
not true. Oh my goodness.
I wanted to sit at like the grown-up table at the holiday dinners and stuff. Eventually that changed because Chad's a great conversationalist. He's a lot of fun. But as a kid, like I wanted to be like absorbing. I was a huge eavesdropper. So I wanted to like hear what they were talking about when we weren't there, which of course you can never do, But yeah, things shifted a lot in those years as I moved through like my late 20s, early 30s, and then into now.
It's interesting that it didn't help though. It was almost like baggage. Like it was the opposite effect of like what I would have thought.
Yeah, yeah. And then like I will write. I'm working on my next book, and that book I feel like I'm starting that at this phase, and I guess you can't really avoid that. It takes years to write a book most of the time, I think. So you're gonna change as a person as it's coming together, but. Yeah, I do try to hold on to some consistency and some sense of like where I was, you know. Yeah.
Great questions, Morgan. All right. Is there anything else you want to say about anything?
I'm a big fan of the podcast.
Thanks.
Keep up the good work. I'm like the biggest fan of it.
Yeah, Shannon listens to every episode of Anarchy multiple times.
I do. I
Yeah.
do it. Everyone's doing great work.
And
Morgan, Josh, Walter, Chad, keep it up.
thank you. All right. Well, this is Nothing But Anarchy. We just had a great conversation with my sister, Shannon Sanders, whose debut collection of short stories company is available everywhere that you get books right now. And Shannon, what's the next stop on your book tour?
I'm going to be in Baltimore next weekend at the Greedy Reads Lost Weekend Festival with some other very cool local authors. So lots of authors coming. If you're in the Baltimore area, you can get a lot of bang for your buck. Come see everybody.
Amazing. Shannon, thanks for being here. We love you. We're so excited for you. And we'll see all of y'all next week on Tuesday. I don't know, by the time, well, if you're sitting here live, we'll see you on Tuesday at noon right here on AMP. And if you're listening to the podcast right now, that's it. Yes, let's ask Shannon some questions about sports ball.
Hit me.
Okay, just
All right.
one or two.
Okay. Let's see. Well, Sauce Gardner is out tomorrow.
No.
I know. And they're playing the Eagles, which is a really good team, obviously. Yeah. So what do you think?
Go Birds.
What do you think will be the Eagles' wide receivers' productivity with no Sauce Gardner out there?
I don't know how they could do it without the sauce.
Okay. Yeah. No, I feel you. Also, so Travis Kelce has been nursing. I know you know him.
I know.
Yeah.
I know Mr. Swift.
Yes. He has an ankle injury. They played on Thursday night, so he's going to get about 10 days to rest it before their next game. But do you think they're going to get him back at 100% productivity this year?
I think even if they don't get him back at 100%, they're going to put him in anyway.
Okay, great. Thank you. Does that check the box, Morgan?
I love
All right, we
that.
talked about sports. Thanks very much. Great job, Shannon.
Thanks, Chad.